What if the key to raising healthier, happier children isn't doing more, it's strengthening the connections around them? Welcome to You're Doing It Right, the parenting podcast hosted by acclaimed psychologist Dr. Leslie Roos and Dr. Lianne Tomfohr-Madsen. In this episode, we're exploring family wellness and why well-being is shaped not just by individuals, but by relationships. Drawing on research and Indigenous perspectives, we'll discuss how connection, community, culture, and shared care help families thrive. Plus, we'll share practical ways to strengthen family bonds and build resilience, moving away from perfection and toward meaningful connection.
Do we have space to do this, Leslie? Or is Orion going to join us?
No, I think we do. I'm just managing outside door sound. They're supposed to be going for a bike ride, but the transition to that is, not as smooth as it could be. It takes a minute.
It takes a minute. Yeah. First they need a snack, then they need to yell.
So I think we can do it.
You're good? Okay.
Welcome to You're Doing It Right, the podcast that's here to remind you you're not messing it all up, you're not a terrible parent, even if it might feel like it on some days. I'm Dr. Leslie Roos, clinical psychologist, researcher, and someone who spent years studying how to support kids and families in the real world, not just on paper.
And I'm Dr. Lianne Tomfohr-Madsen. I'm also a clinical psychologist focused on parent and child mental health, sleep, stress, and how we actually make support accessible for families who need it most.
Between us, we've led national research, developed digital mental health programs, and worked with families across diverse communities. Yes, we've seen and personally experienced just how complex parenting can be.
But this podcast isn't about perfection. It's about giving you practical, usable tools you can actually try, backed by science and delivered with a whole lot of compassion. Think of it as expert advice wrapped in a hug.
At the end of the day, you don't need to get everything right to be a great parent. We just want you to feel a little bit more confident in what you're already doing and supported by folks around you. This is You're Doing It Right.
Today, we're stepping back to look at something bigger, family wellness. Not just individual mental health, but how the relationships within a family shape how everyone is doing.
We often think about well-being as something that lives inside one person. But research, and especially Indigenous ways of understanding wellness, tell us something pretty different. Instead, our well-being is deeply connected to our relationships, our community, and even generations before and after us.
Exactly. Indigenous perspectives on family wellness emphasize connection with the family, across extended family, within the community, within the land. It's not about one person thriving in isolation. It's about a whole system being supported.
And that can feel like a shift, because so many parents are trying to get it right on their own. But in reality, families have always been shaped by many people, many relationships, and shared care.
Which is why today we want to move away from perfection and towards connection.
We'll talk about what family wellness really means and how relationships shape mental health and why supporting both parents and children matters.
And we'll explore the role of culture, community, and intergenerational connection, along with some practical ways to strengthen those bonds in everyday life.
I think that children thrive most when they have multiple different people in their lives who they can go to for that support that they feel safe going to.
It's what you do most of the time that matters. And so that's just so normalizing that as parents, we are doing good stuff most of the time.
Today, we're joined by two incredible guests who bring not only deep professional expertise, but also powerful lived experience to this conversation. Dr. Lianne Fontaine is an assistant professor in clinical health psychology at the University of Manitoba and a clinical psychologist candidate working with women and families. She is an Anishinaabe researcher, proud Winnipegger, and urban band member of Saugeen First Nation. Her research focuses on Indigenous mental health, exploring the historical, cultural, psychological, and socio-political factors that shape well-being. She also develops culturally grounded approaches to support families and communities.
We're also joined by Sandra Hunter, a PhD candidate in clinical psychology at the University of Manitoba. Sandra spent years as a family-first home visitor, walking alongside families in their day-to-day lives, and she's deeply passionate about supporting Indigenous families. Her research focuses on traditional Indigenous child-rearing practices and the reclamation of cultural teachings to support family wellness, cultural identity, and intergenerational connection within Indigenous communities.
We're so excited for this conversation. Sandra, let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about your story and the path that brought you here?
I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I grew up in Dauphin River First Nation, and I'm a member of Lake St. Martin First Nation. So I grew up not being exposed to traditional Anishinaabe culture. So one of the things I wanted to be able to do was to learn about my culture for myself, and then also to find a way to help others learn about it if that's something that they're interested in. So my current research is about traditional child rearing. I've been talking with knowledge keepers and service providers on ways to create a child rearing program for First Nations families. And so this is to be able to help families bring culture into their homes. It's a way of helping our communities reclaim the culture that was impacted by colonization.
Could you tell me a little bit about why that's important to you?
I think a lot of the motivation that I have for the work that I do comes from being a mother myself. So I recognize that the challenges that I had, particularly when coming to live in the city with my family. And so I left my support systems behind back in my community. So I wanted to be able to do something to support families who are also having similar challenges. So we're all learning together.
And how about you, Aaliyah? Can you tell us a little bit more about what brought you here?
I was born here in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory, and I have lived here my entire life. Family is really, really important to me. I've always been very close with my parents, with my siblings, with my cousins, extended family. I was really fortunate in that I was able to complete all of my education here in Winnipeg. Like Sandra, I'm an Anishinaabe through my dad's side of the family, and I'm a proud urban band member of Saugeen First Nation. And then on my mom's side of the family, I have a mix of mostly British and German ancestry. Right now, I work as a psychologist and as an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Health Psychology at the University of Manitoba. And then on the clinical side of things, I also provide psychological services within the public health system, where I work in the area of women's health. And then on the research side of things, I mainly focus on Indigenous mental health quite broadly, looking at things like historical and social and psychological and relational factors.
I think thinking about mental health more broadly in this family and community context is so critical. Can you share what that means to you and how that might align better with Indigenous worldviews or more holistic versions of wellness?
When I think about family wellness, I think about the interconnectedness. We are all connected in some way. And so when we lift one person up, we lift others as well. And so if we can support the whole family, we are doing even more. The other thing I think about family wellness is that it's not just about the nuclear family. And so that is supported by Indigenous worldviews as well. It includes others inside that family. And it's also really about the family choosing who they want to support. So there's no one size fits all, but it is about the family determining what's best for them. It's not about what this dominant society says a family should look like, and it's unique for everyone. So when you have many people working together, the work can be shared. Everyone can have a chance to take a break, for example, to have a breather and calm down, because they're all sharing that load. And I think this can be difficult for single moms and single dads. So I would love to see some community building around those who are feeling overwhelmed or even need a break.
I echo absolutely everything that Sandra just shared. One of our foundational, most important sacred laws is this law of interconnection, right? We as Indigenous people, we understand that we do not live through this life in isolation. We are connected to one another and we are dependent on one another, right? So humans, we are fundamentally relational beings. Our brains and our emotional systems are developing with those early relationships that we have with our caregivers. And that continues all through our lives. It doesn't just stop in childhood. Those quality relationships that we have continue to shape things like how resilient we are when we are faced with different challenges or different stressors, and have a huge impact on our emotional well-being. So when we look at things from a systemic perspective, when we support families, when we really work on supporting those and strengthening those relationships, we are supporting that mental health for everybody who is within that system.
I love the concept of interconnectedness. I'm curious, Sandra, in your own life, could you just talk a little bit about how this is reflected in the choices that you make?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I do, try to embody that value of that interconnectedness. And I think that one of the things that we do with that value is to be able to see ourselves in different parts of our life. For example, when you live with multi-generations, you can develop a sense of empathy for all of those people that you are living with. You know what it's like to be a child and have curiosity and want to explore and discover. And so older folks can remember that time and have that joy. And then as children are growing up, they can see their parents and what those struggles look like or those joys that they have. And then as getting older, for my children and my grandson to see me and my husband's parents and the supports that we have for them, it's a demonstration and it's a model of caring for the whole family together. And so trying to demonstrate that it's not something that you can teach in a book, but you're teaching it by your actions and what you do every day.
Leah, when you work with families, what are some of those key elements of, interconnectedness that you think really help families thrive, or might you encourage someone to seek out?
Like Sandra was kind of alluding to a little bit earlier, I think it's also important to remember that, family doesn't just mean the nuclear family, but just people in your community, friends or other parents who you meet. If you don't feel like you kind of have that family support, like biological family support, you can make your own family community. It can look like a lot of things. Another thing I see come up quite often is some of those barriers when it comes to actually reaching out to for support. I think that sometimes people get the message that they have to do everything all on their own. And if they aren't able to manage all of these things by themselves, that they're somehow failing as a mom or as a parent. And I wanted to really challenge that, right? I don't think that children were ever meant to be raised by one person or just by, a couple of people. I think that children thrive most when they have multiple different people in their lives who they can go to for that support, that they feel safe going to for. The more relationships that kids can have, the more people who they can go to, the more love that they can get. I think that really sets the stage for, an environment where they can really thrive.
Sandra, what are your thoughts on that?
I love this, the autonomy that's there and the choice that's there. That connection is really, really important. There's something that I think parents are already doing that is building on modeling and demonstrating, and children learn by observation. And that's empathy. This is putting yourself in someone else's experience, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So for example, when a baby is crying, we try to figure out what is making them cry and how to help them with that. That's empathy. And when we can do this not just for a baby, but for a toddler, for our school-age kids, and others in our lives, including, our partners, our spouses, our sisters and brothers, right? As adults, we also desire to be seen and heard and empathized with. And so that can help us to bond and experience a closeness that brings us together.
The First Peoples of Canada have always had an interconnected understanding of family. Each person has a special role to play in supporting their community. Elders hold the sacred responsibility of teaching the children to have healthy, respectful relationships with the world around them. These teachings nurture a sense of identity in each child.
That was an excerpt from Raising the Spirit, narrated by Tom Jackson, helping new parents of Indigenous children develop more cultural connection. To check out the full video, you can refer to the show description. Let's take a moment to dive a little deeper here before we go back to the conversation. I think so many parents today feel like they're supposed to do it all on their own, and that's just not how families were ever meant to function. It's not good for parents. I don't think it's good for kids.
For sure. It's really a Western, colonial assumption that this is how we should be functioning related to capitalism and everything else. And when you look at Indigenous ways of knowing, I think there's a really different sort of deep understanding that a child should never be raised in isolation, that they're held in a circle with family, extended family, community. And that sense of belonging is really foundational to well-being.
And it takes so much pressure off of parents too. Because right now, a lot of parents are exhausted. They're trying to be everything for their child. They're trying to make meals. They're trying to be their child's only or best confidant. But in a more connected model, support is shared.
Yes, and kids benefit so much from that. Different adults bring different strengths. One adult might be a listener, another a teacher, another a safe place to land. And all these different important connections create resilience because a child isn't just relying on one relationship to meet all their needs. They know they're part of something bigger, a whole community of people to support them, and that they want to support too.
Yeah, I love that idea of a circle of care. And it invites us to think about who's in that circle. Is it our friends, our neighbors, other parents, our mentors? I am thinking about one of my friends who, when she wrote her will, she indicated what she wanted each of her friends to do if she passed away for her children. And so for me, she asked me to make sure that I was with them through all of their university decision making. And it felt like such an honor. And it was something that I could really do for them. But it was just outside of her family. It was not just all going to be on her husband if she wasn't going to be there for the kids.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And when we're thinking about supporting kids and what that looks like, it really ties into the idea of thinking about multiple generations or 7 generations. It shifts us away from reacting in the moment to asking these bigger picture important questions about my relationship with my child. What am I building here? What patterns am I passing on? How do I want to leave sort of my legacy, and how am I shaped by the legacy of my ancestors?
And it slows things down. So parenting can become less about quick fixes and more about long-term impacts, values, relationships, and emotional safety.
And kids really feel that when they know they're part of something bigger, that they belong not just to a household, but to a community. And that builds identity, safety, and confidence.
It also gives parents permission to reach out and to say, I need help, or can you be a part of my child's world? That's not a failure. It's actually aligned with how we're meant to raise children. That saying it takes a village really resonates here. The role of community in family life is a topic that comes up all the time in parenting conversations and in the media as well. As this segment from Daytime Chicago highlights, meaningful connections can play an important role in supporting both children and their caregivers.
Author and psychotherapist Kelly Kitley joins us now to talk about the importance of building a community for both kids and parents.
We are born into communities with family, and human beings are social people. The importance of what community can bring for us in terms of connection and support and feeling validated.
Connection is protective for kids, for parents, for everyone. It's great for kids to see parents reaching out for support, because then it teaches kids that when they're having a hard time, they can also reach out to support, find their people. And the more we rebuild those networks and communities for ourselves, for our kids, for the people around us, even in small ways, the more families will feel in society. And that's something that I think has really been impacted with the pandemic, with social media, with everything else.
And the takeaway is you don't have to do this alone. And in fact, you're not supposed to.
When we raise children in connection with intention, community, and that long-term view, we're not just supporting them, we're shaping generations to come. So going back to that conversation with Dr. Lianne Tomfohr-Madsen and Sandra Hunter, we asked about when parents feel stuck, if they haven't created community to support their parenting, or they feel isolated alone. How do they put themselves out there? How can they start to create community?
Going out and seeing other people, it might seem like a small thing for some people, but for others, it might be a really big thing. It can be scary to do. And so, going for a walk in the community or visiting a park with your children can lead to building connections. But sometimes it has to start smaller than that. If you're struggling to get out to that place, it's about making those small little steps to eventually get there, knowing that that's the goal in the end. And so just going outside the door, sitting on the step, for example, for a while, and then going a little bit farther, and the next time going a little bit farther until you actually get to the park, and then see that there's other children for your children to play with, other moms or dads for you to talk to.
Another way that I sometimes kind of think about it is some of the short-term versus long-term impact. Whether you have a tendency to kind of really stay inside and at home, or whether you tend to go out more and try to make an intentional effort to connect with others in your community. And I wanted to just first acknowledge that, I totally get it. Why, when it's the end of the day, you've been really, really busy and you're just feeling quite exhausted, how maybe the last thing that you kind of feel like doing is kind of getting out and socializing more. It totally makes sense why you'd want to kind of stay in and conserve some energy and rest. But I'd encourage people to kind of think about, what are some of the short-term versus long-term impacts of that, right? So of course, if you're kind of staying in, there is that short-term benefit, and that, might be feeling like you're kind of conserving energy, right? You don't have to go through the whole, packing up the kids in their snowsuits and getting into the car or on the bus and going somewhere. But what are some of the long-term impacts of that? If you're always kind of staying in, if you're not really getting out, if you're not getting to know your neighbors, over time, you might start to feel lonely. You might start to feel isolated. You have less people in your phone list who you can text or call up when you want some support. And when maybe you're not feeling the most energetic, finding some way to override that and getting out some of the long-term impacts of that. Well, you start to build relationships. You start to feel more connected to other people. You start to have that sense of belonging. You also have more people who you can talk to or call on when you're needing that support. So, I really, really encourage parents to kind of reflect carefully on some of those things.
When we're talking about community, family, all those pieces of raising children, I want to go back a little bit to some of the, research that you touched upon early on. Sandra, I know you talked about how your work focuses on traditional Indigenous parenting practices. What are some of the teachings or values that come to mind that might guide those approaches to raising children?
I just want to remind Indigenous parents and families that it's not their fault that they didn't grow up with that knowledge. And so that's what those systems forced on us were meant to do. So we're all relearning these things together. I think that's an important thing to note because I've experienced those feelings as well as I'm trying to relearn culture. One of those values that has come out of my research is that children are a gift from Creator and they are sacred. And since each one of us was also a child and a gift from Creator, we are also sacred and we are enough. And I think living with that value allows us to see our worth and to see our preciousness and that our lives are important. That can be healing to recognize our sacredness and maybe even allow us to start to let go of some of the shame that was taught to us about who we are, what kind of parents we are. And so that's one of the really core values that can have an impact on many other things. And another one is that of storytelling. And so our cultures are passed down from generation to generation through telling stories of our history, our creation stories, events that have happened, animal stories, and even stories about ourselves, which are really important. So, that storytelling offers an opportunity for the family to come together, to share laughter, to reflect on their lives, and promote that bonding and connection and feeling a sense of closeness to the other because you know what their story is. The sense of love and belonging for a child to hear those stories. And if you can't remember, just talk about what you can remember. You don't have to have a complete story, how you felt when they were born, those kind of things.
We really appreciate you sharing those pieces, Alia. I'm curious about your work. How have you seen culturally grounded approaches or reconnection into something that supports mental health and well-being for families?
To kind of echo a lot about what Sandra and I have been talking about is that, within our Indigenous communities, our children are raised in a network of grandparents and aunties and uncles and community members and cousins. And those relationships across generations are incredibly important. And just having a broad range of having multiple sources of love and support and guidance is incredibly important, again, for creating those conditions where children can really thrive. Also need to make sure that I'm also treating myself with that same kindness and that same patience and that same compassion. I think that is a really, really important message for parents to carry. Because in my experience clinically, I find that so many of the moms who I work with can be incredibly hard on themselves, can be very, very critical on themselves. They can hold themselves to very high, unrealistic standards, right? They feel that pressure to be perfect, get everything right all the time. I think that when we treat ourselves with compassion, when we go easy on ourselves, we can kind of create those conditions within ourselves that allow us to also create conditions where, the rest of our family, our children especially, can thrive.
I know that pressure to do things perfectly, or if it's not perfect right now, then you're doing it right. How would you help people move away from that mindset a little bit?
Well, I would say the very first step is to actually just becoming aware of that tendency within yourself. Sometimes these self-critical tendencies can become such a habit that people just do it without even noticing that they're doing so, right? It could be something that they've been doing and treating themselves in that way, talking to themselves in that way since they were maybe themselves kids. So, the very first step is just to start to notice it.
I'd like to add to that. One of the things that has stuck with me that someone said to me when I was struggling as a parent and trying to do everything exactly right, someone said, it's what you do most of the time that matters. And so that's just so normalizing that as parents, we are doing good stuff most of the time. And we need to honor that and focus on that. And then some days we have a bad day. But that doesn't happen every single day. It's what we do most of the time that matters. The other thing that I think about when I think about children observing us as parents and how we model to them is that if it's okay for mom to make a mistake, it's also okay for the child to make a mistake. Because a lot of children are also worried about failure and they're worried about doing it wrong and they don't want to make mistakes. But when they see mom make a mistake and mom go, oh, I made a mistake, I'm going to keep moving on, then they know it's okay for them to do that as well. So we're also modeling, acceptance of ourselves as human beings that do make mistakes and are still able to keep going and carrying on.
Can we speak to the idea of parents who maybe feel like they were a bit broken and ask the question, can I still be a good parent if I made mistakes?
So making mistakes is okay. So we can be broken and still be a good parent.
You should not expect that you are never going to make mistakes, right? Every single parent is going to mess up at some point or other. But again, what Sandra said about what you do most of the time is what matters most. And what I would also add further to that is that it's kind of the way that you respond to the mistakes that you make. So really that repair after making a mistake is what really also matters a lot too.
I'm thinking about us being human, and mistakes are something that exist in our lives, but this is you're doing it right. And so what we can do is find our strengths, find the things that we have done right, and focus on those. So what we focus on grows. If we think about ourselves like a plant and giving ourselves water and giving ourselves sunshine, and so we can grow more. If you focus on something that has been done really well or that you've done really well, the chances are that that's going to repeat and you're going to increase your chance of doing that again and again because you've focused on it. So when we focus on our strengths, those tend to grow and our mistakes and our failures will tend to kind of go off to the side.
I think both of those things are so spot on and true. And I think that when we expect perfection or we expect ourselves not to make mistakes, we can get really avoidant and shameful of when we do make mistakes. I saw some recent research on that idea, Sandra, of like modeling making mistakes is a good thing. And if it's okay, ask you to share when we're teaching. It's something that you previously shared with me that has really stuck with me. And it's related to this idea of all children being sacred. It's also about kids being exactly how they should be. And I find that really grounding when I'm managing challenges or frustrations with my own family's quirky personalities. It was something that was from your master's thesis. It was around individuals' differences also being sort of how they should be.
Speaking as a parent and a researcher and a clinician in clinical psychology, I do value the differences that I have in my children. That ability to demonstrate and model acceptance. I think, is really important. It does make it challenging as a parent to have to parent 4 children with completely different personalities, because it means you have to constantly switch your parenting style for those children. And I think especially for, like you're talking about, for families that have children with special needs, it can be particularly challenging because that child will need so much more support. And so when the entire family can support the child that needs more, it promotes a sense of teamwork as well, and an honoring of diversity. We have so much diversity in our Indigenous cultures. We have diversity in our families as well. So diversity exists on multiple different levels. You can have a conversation about how beautiful it is that someone can be different and still be loved and accepted for who they are, just as they are.
I love that message. Can I ask each of you if you had one takeaway for a parent who's struggling, maybe with identity connection or their own mental health or the mental health of their kids? What would you want to share with people?
I really want them to know deeply that struggling, it doesn't mean that they're failing, right? Parenting is one of the most meaningful, but also an incredibly challenging thing that people can do, right? And asking for support and giving yourself that compassion, that love is really part of taking care of you as well as your family. I also often think about one of our other teachings about 7 generations. So we understand that the things that we do today can impact people over many generations to come. So if you are really taking care of yourself, showing yourself compassion, asking for some support, not only are you taking care of yourself and your children and your family, you're also potentially impacting generations to come.
Someone had said to me, "You are your ancestors' dream." And so connecting with that 7 generations that Aaliyah is talking about, all of those ancestors that came before me had dreamt of me existing today and doing the work that I do today and having the children that I have. And so it helps me to feel loved from the past and to be able to pass my love on to the future. So you are your ancestors' dream. Our ancestors have gone through a lot to get us where we are today, and we're still here.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for coming and, sharing just a little bit of all the wonderful, work you do, things that, are important to promoting well-being and connection for everyone. Any closing words you want to say? Anything else?
I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a wonderful opportunity to be able to share.
I also wanted to say thank you as well.
I think we're often so hard on ourselves as parents and as people when we do mess up. So thank you for giving us that virtual hug that we so often need. As we wrap up, I think the biggest takeaway is this: we're not meant to do this alone. Family wellness isn't just about our kids. It's about supporting parents too.
And connection really is at the heart of it all. Relationships, community, and those small everyday moments, they matter more than we sometimes realize. Even the simplest check-in, a shared meal, or time with someone who cares can be a game changer and make a lasting difference. I also want to note that these connections are not always easy. They can feel like we're going out of our comfort zone, we're reaching out to someone we might have declined an invitation to for in the past, but taking those steps toward connection can be really important to be shifting how you're feeling and how you feel supported.
Right, and we're all learning as we go. There's no perfect way to parent. We're doing our best, and that's what we have, and that's enough.
Absolutely. You know your kid best. You're the perfect parent for them. And when we can take care of ourselves and people around us, we will create stronger families and healthy environments for all of our kids to grow up in.
And there's so much we can learn from Indigenous ways of knowing. This idea of connectedness, community, of thinking beyond ourselves, echoes that raising children is something we need to do together as a part of a community.
Through sharing, supporting, and showing up for one another, that's where the real growth can happen for all of us, and it can look different for every person.
We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. What does your circle look like?
And next time on You're Doing It Right, we're taking on another important topic: parenting without punishment, tools for positive discipline.
So until then, take care of yourselves and each other and know you're doing it right.
You're Doing It Right podcast was supported by funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Listen to episodes from You're Doing It Right wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, and visit yourdoingitRightpodcast.ca. Connect, follow, and reach out to You're Doing It Right with your questions or comments on Instagram at You're Doing It Right Podcast.
Another Everything Podcast production. Visit everythingpodcast.com, a division of Pattison Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast.